So the miracle that the world was hoping for didn't happen yesterday.
It did not.
So we found out yesterday that submersible, I call it the tourist submarine, that went down to the Titanic. You guys know the story by now. For a couple of days, it's been down there, about an hour and 45 minutes into a 2-hour voyage down to the Titanic. You have 5 people, I believe.
Correct.
5 that were in this.
That's the max I can fit in it.
Submersible, and they have been looking for it, but damn, the thing is 13,000 feet underneath the sea, and they haven't been able to find it. And we were all hoping the last couple of days that some kind of miracle would happen where they'd find it in time before it ran out of oxygen and then bring that thing to the surface. They would get out. We'd all be overjoyed. Found out yesterday that was not the case. It was a tragedy that the thing at some point or another just imploded.
That's probably the pressure.
The pressure from being down that far, and quite frankly, it not being constructed in a responsible way, to be honest with you, which we'll get into here in just one second. But they found the debris field yesterday, and they now know that, or they think that once they lost communication with the, again, submarine, that's when it imploded. If I'm a family member, as I said earlier this morning, for me, I do take some comfort in that. I mean, you're going to mourn. You've just lost some family members for sure. But the fact that they weren't down there for 4 days just contemplating their death or holding on to hope and sitting in the dark and literally having to pee and poop next to each other, that's terrifying to me. The 4 or 5 days is terrifying, thinking my family had to go through that kind of stress. And you almost hate to say it. It almost sounds insensitive, maybe, that the best case scenario is they never knew it was coming. And it happened so fast. All of these scientists and all these experts yesterday saying it happened in a flash. There was no fear. It was just over.
There's a lot of secondary stories coming from this, too. So we know there was a billionaire and his son down there, and the CEO of this company, and 2 others. But what I saw yesterday that broke my heart, if it is indeed true, the billionaire's sister, so the 19-year-old who is in that submersible, his aunt, she told the, I don't remember which news outlet, but she told someone that the 19-year-old did this for his dad for Father's Day, that he was terrified to go down there and didn't want to do it, but his dad wanted to do it for Father's Day, so he did it. Yeah,
I think you're going to hear a lot of stories like this. The stories leading up to why they went. The others are a little bit less blurry. I mean, you've got a guy that's been down there like 60 times, so he had no fear of it. You had the owner, and the way he constructed it, even though he felt it was responsible, he had a whole bunch of experts around him saying, dude, you're skipping, you got to pay attention to the rules on this thing. And he was kind of a maverick. Like, he took a lot of pride in breaking some of the rules and putting this thing together, and this is the result here.
And Abby, didn't you tell us a story how the captain had connections to the Titanic?
Oh, yeah, I thought this was really wild. So the captain of this submarine, his wife, if you've seen Titanic, the tragic scene where, it's all coming to an end and the ship is sinking, there's a scene where there's an elderly couple holding each other as the water is rushing in. Well, that elderly couple is actually based on a real life couple who the wife of the CEO is the great granddaughter of, which is wild. And it probably explains why they have a fascination with the Titanic.
It's just frustrating, too, when you hear all the reports coming out. What I've seen online is that the window in the submersible was safety rated only to about a quarter of the depth that they were going to. I mean, obviously, they had been down before, but that is a very weak point. And I haven't been able to confirm this, but what's said is that there was a whistleblower saying, hey, this isn't up to standards, and that person was fired. From the team. Again, do your own research. This is what I'm seeing early come out. So there's a lot of things, but I do also take some solace in the fact that it was so fast. And this is from Dave Corley, who's a former nuclear sub-officer. He says that the human brain responds to stimulus in about 25 milliseconds. Your rational response is at best 150 milliseconds. That submarine collapsed in 1 millisecond. They might have heard a couple creaks beforehand. They didn't know it was happening. They felt nothing. It was instantaneous. And so that, to me, I hate that it happened, but thank God they didn't live through the horror and the nightmare that we all thought they were.
So the famous director James Cameron, who was the writer and director of Titanic, he had a lot to say about this yesterday. But you also have to remember, he's not coming from a place like, hey, I'm an expert here because I shot a movie about Titanic.
With Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet.
Because that's what I thought.
No, this dude's kind of an expert, man. I mean, he designs these kind of vehicles to go under the water, and he's gone down about 30 different times. So he knows what he's talking about when he was in an interview yesterday saying that they shouldn't have been taking taking civilians to the Titanic in that vehicle in the first place. And he also goes on to say that, the owner here ignored the signs, which is so irresponsible.
Now, I mean, James Cameron, too, there are images online, and I'll send one to Rebecca to retweet from the Bert Show account of what he set the record for the deepest dive, and he went to Challenger Deep, which is the deepest known point in the ocean in the Mariana Trench at something like 33,000 feet. And the Titanic was about 12,500, 13,000 feet. But to give you a visual, when they went down to the Titanic, the Titan, you could fit 5 people in this tube, right? When James Cameron dove, his submersible, the cockpit was 43 inches wide, and he had to sit in a fetal position.
Wow.
Because there was so much equipment inside to make sure that he was safe. So that really, when you look at the diagrams, puts it a little more in perspective on how technically challenging it is to dive that deep.
I think the world was kind of bracing for this anyway. They were telling us it wasn't going to take one miracle. It was going to take a series of miracles. And if you're the family, I think you're holding on to that. It's like hitting the lottery. You're saying there's a chance, right? But in this case, it was worst case scenario. So that story ends here. And the only thing we'll have over the next couple of days, again, is probably more stories about how irresponsible this was and why these guys were on it in the first place.
Yeah.
Rest in peace to those passengers, and send your thoughts to their families.
The Bert Show.
Like what you just watched, you can get more of The Bert Show on your favorite podcast platform. Wherever you listen to your podcast, you can find us. I don't know what any of these buttons do, by the way.